Welcome to Ocean School. This is episode 6 of Ocean School podcast, which is one of the offerings of the Ocean School Collective's 2025 Gettleman Environmental Installation Artist Residency at the Ocean Alliance in Gloucester, Massachusetts, sponsored by the Rocky Neck Art Colony in September 2025. Here we are in episode 6. We are unfolding this inquiry into the core of the project, which is an open art school devoted to promoting an environmental ethic for ocean conservation that we call ocean thinking. It comes out of an artistic project that we are still engaged in as we produce the amazing Expedition Oceanborn as a speculative fabulation, durational performance with the 5 members of the Ocean School Collective and everybody else who became part of Ocean School, which continues and includes you, the audience. And so today I have a very, very special guest, Dr. Terri Pyle. Terri Pyle is an athlete-philosopher-artist. We have known each other for really only about a year, or I would say about a year, which is amazing, but we share so much. We both have PhDs in art theory, aesthetics, and philosophy from the Institute of Doctoral Studies in the Visual Arts. So we do share a lot through that. And Terri is a perfect guest for Ocean School. She's an ocean athlete, which she's going to tell you about. We're going to learn more. So I'm going to let Terri introduce herself. And she's coming out with a book on ocean phenomenology and the athlete-philosopher-artist. So this is very exciting, and we're going to just launch into a conversation that's going to last maybe up to an hour. And we'll just see where it goes. So thank you for joining us on this podcast. Terri, welcome.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you for inviting me here. I was so pleased when you reached out and said, well, I've got the reservation at the studio for the podcast at 10 a.m. on Monday, April 6th. And I was like, I better book a flight. So here I am. And yes, I am very excited to share a lot of what I've researched and written about in regards to oceanic phenomenology and the athlete-philosopher-artist. It is under review for a book at Rutledge, and so I'm super excited about that. And I also want to applaud you on your recent publication. Good company to be in. Thank you so much for having me. I guess you introduced me as an ocean athlete. So I have done competitive marathon swimming for many years, but as you and I have discovered about each other recently, we grew up swimming competitively in a pool. And it was probably when I was pregnant with my son, Chase, that I started realizing after swimming laps in the pool every day up until the day of birth, that I'd love to explore more of swimming outside of the confines of the pool and into the ocean. And that started my journey. But what was really wonderful about being in the IDSVA program is I got to write more philosophically about those experiences. And that lent itself to my, artistic practice of writing. And then from there, it was allowing me to turn that into a course that I teach at the University of Central Florida called Sports as an Aesthetic, as a humanities course in the philosophy department. So it's been a wonderful journey, and I love how it's fitting in with your oceanic thinking. We talked this morning over coffee about how I have a slight departure from you, in the sense of I look at the ocean in terms of an ontology, which means being immersed in the ocean in an athletic performance, if you will, or activity, more so than the contemplation of it. I definitely think we're on the same path ultimately.
Yes, well, at Ocean School, we are engaged in this idea of jumping on the back of a whale and diving into the deep and going into the belly of the whale even, and this idea of trying to push ourselves out of a kind of normal ways that we think into thinking through ocean thinking. And I love the way that you bring in the phenomenology as a body experience. And so I hope that we get to go and talk about these wonderful philosophers that we share, who talk about phenomenology and ontology. These are big words in philosophy, but we love them and we want to enfold them. You know, what is it like to be in the ocean as a swimmer? So let's start there. You have had an amazing run of ocean swimming all around Florida, but then in the Caribbean, in South Africa, in the Mediterranean Sea, and maybe just take us on a journey to some of those experiences of different oceans that you've been able to swim in.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. I guess, too, I would include the Aegean Sea. And I think that was probably the most remarkable experience for me because it was an abyss, essentially. I'm so used to being a Florida girl and seeing a lot of marine life, and here I was swimming this marathon, swim across the Torneius Gulf, and I didn't see any marine life the whole time I was in the water. And, you know, that was almost a 10-hour day, and so that was quite striking. But it was incredible, a beautiful experience. Swimming around Key West in the Atlantic was also a great experience. And then Cape Town, that was still the Atlantic Ocean, but I was in False Bay. I did some free diving there through the kelp forest, which was very new. Maybe a little frightening because you just didn't know what was going to, you know, pop up in front of you. But and also the cold was a new experience for me as a Floridian. But learning how to adapt to it was a great experience. And oh gosh, now I forget where else I was. Where else was I? But yeah, so a lot of ocean experiences were helping me understand a body philosophy, which Friedrich Nietzsche talks a lot about in Ecce Homo, becoming what you are. And I think after all those experiences and entering into a philosophy program, I started to connect the dots. But then meeting artists who were former athletes like Rand Ortner, and he is a wonderful wave painter. I had the opportunity to interview him in his studio in New York a few years ago, and he represented this concept of the athlete-philosopher-artist for sure, because he started out as a competitive motorcyclist and doing motocross, and then he became a surfer, and then he started painting these incredible muralesque wave paintings. And along the way, reading Rilke. So, you know, it was just really helping me to put all of this together and to be able to write about it.
Yeah, and it's amazing that you write about the ocean, the experience of the athlete, and also ways that these experiences are mediated through art, such as painting, but also literary art. Yeah. You talk about film, and you have an amazing eye for catching those moments in the films that you write about, in the film stills. And there's something that we talked about in a conversation which was about the encounter in the ocean, because you know, you're a marathon swimmer, and some of these distances it's hard for me to compute. How many miles was that, and what is that like when you swim a long distance experience? And then if you do happen to encounter marine life, it's an encounter. It's kind of an ocean experience of encountering things that it maybe happens in a moment and is gone in a flash.
For sure. And I'm so pleased you want to know about this. Most people are like, what are you doing? This is crazy, right? I think the way to really, for me to frame it is always through philosophy, right? And so instead of encounter, I really believe in what Maurice Merleau-Ponty writes about in phenomenology, and this experience of being in a milieu, right? I think the ocean is a milieu where our body becomes more pronounced and aware, our senses become more aware. And I guess the most recent experience that wasn't even in the swimming process was I was sharing with you earlier of seeing this almost 4-foot long squid wash up on the shore of South Beach, and I'm seeing it, all of its iridescent colors just illuminate and able to assist it back into the ocean. I wasn't expecting that, but it's the same thing during a swim. You're first in the mindset of competition and finishing. And I guess, my first marathon was 12.5 miles around Key West. I saw a lot of nurse sharks. Initially, I was very afraid, but then when you learn about the marine life, they're very docile creatures, and they're not out for attack unless you are attacking them or in their way, right? So that's the first thing you learn, to be the fish. Like Cousteau says, if you want to know about the fish, be the fish. And just understand yourself as you're sharing this environment. You're both navigating it and being aquarium-like, and everybody's doing their thing. And as I mentioned in the Aegean Sea, that was a 26K. So I went back to these repeatedly. I did the Key West swim 5 times. I did the 26K across the Tornais Gulf 3 times. St. Croix from Buck Island to St. Croix itself was 5-mile swim. I did that 5 times. And I wanted to keep going back to see how it would be different. And it was so different every time. St. Croix, saw tons of sea turtles swimming underneath me, and that was wonderful. And when I did the lighthouse swim in Almirada, that was 8 miles, I saw these beautiful nurse sharks swim underneath me. I saw their eyes roll. It was just, but every time there was this fear, but there was also this sentience of emotional connection, if you will, this feeling that their being was equally, if not more important actually, than I was in that environment. When I swam in Bonaire, or I guess they call it Bonaire, in the Netherlands Antilles off the coast of Venezuela, I saw hammerheads feeding directly underneath me, and I think I shared with you, I don't think I've ever swam so fast in my life because I was terrified, but in a good way, And when I was reading Nietzsche and his Ecce Homo and Becoming What You Are text and his body philosophy, he was like, when you have the struggle and you have that fear and you're able to overcome it, that's when you know who you are. And I think that's what I enjoy writing about because of these experiences. People who are not ocean swimmers look at you like, why? Are you crazy? But in the process, not only are you counting marine life, but you're also reflecting and you're thinking about your own life. And I will say, I thought a lot about my son. What example am I setting for him? Strength and endurance is maybe, these are good things to role model for him. And then he went on to become a great rower. That's another water sport that I haven't yet written about, which I would love to do,
Well, it's so interesting. Your experience and ocean athletes are have an experience that a lot of us don't have, even though many of us swim in the ocean. But that longer experience makes me really think about some of the research the Ocean School Collective have done in the archives of the Ocean Alliance, which is about the humpback whale songs, where the males only sing when they go from the north to the south. So your experience of doing 5 different swims across 2 islands in the Caribbean, and every single time it's different, it makes me think of these songs. One of the kind of ideas we have of these songs is that it is concrete poetry about what is encountered in these experiences from one place to another. They get repeated, kind of like a Homeric ode.
Yeah.
And they're things, they're events that people remember from,
It's
do you
epic.
remember that year that happened? So I wondered if you were to sing a song about, say, one of those multi-year, there would be a flavor to the different oceans, right?
Absolutely.
And how would you describe that? How are the oceans different from each other?
Yeah. Okay. The Aegean Sea is definitely like an abyss of darkness, honestly. But when the sun comes out, there's this prism of light that just kind of guides you. The Caribbean, and even I swam in Tahiti as well, and in Bonaire, I'll cluster those together. It's like this incredible aquarium. You couldn't ask for anything better, and you're right there. And in South Beach, Miami, even though I didn't do a marathon there, I would casually swim, and lots of barracuda that would just swim alongside of me, and we're just looking at each other, and so I just always felt like I had this companion, this barracuda companion, and then the Pacific Ocean, for me, I did a lot of short swims, 1 milers, and for me, it was just about competition, because I was in such a big crowd of people, and it was kind of a survival mode. So that was a different kind of experience. St. Croix was poetic because the sea turtle swim or flight, whatever you want to call it, is so slow and beautiful and rhythmic, and so and the same with the stingrays, that you would see. I think when I got to swim and the sharks run underneath me when I was in Almirada, I really felt like there were two right together. I wish we could have swum together the whole way. It was a communal thing. But like we talked about before, they're very momentary. They're quick, they're fleeting, but they're extremely impressionable.
Wonderful. And we were kind of talking at coffee, and one of the interesting sections that you talk about in the book, maybe under the category of the sublime, is the rage of the sea, being in a shipwreck or a storm, or some of the ways that the surface of the ocean can get choppy, but maybe the depth. You also talk about free divers who go down, and that's a different experience of the depth. So, with all of your hours in the ocean, maybe if you could talk about the quality of the ocean and the experience on your body and the differences, and maybe things that you remember about, I don't know, being in a turbulent sea or a calm sea or something like that.
Yeah, so this is the part where I think non-swimmers might have a pause to think about the ocean not as a rage, but as its natural, rhythmic, cyclical self. I did write about Sloterdijk's rage in his book, Enthymos, which relates to Aristotle, and it's more human. Sometimes we want to personify the ocean and say that it's experiencing rage, but in actuality, it's just going through its natural stages, right? And when I'm out in the ocean, I actually like it. The rougher it gets, because I know that's a greater challenge for me, and I like the feeling of that. I went freediving in Cape Town in the sea kelp forest in extremely cold water for me as a Floridian. It was probably 50 degrees, even though I had a wetsuit on and I had fins, but I didn't have, wetsuit socks, if you will. And my feet were freezing, my hands were freezing, my face was freezing. But I wanted to feel it all. And with research, I've discovered the cold water is absolutely fantastic for your body and for healing. So that part I was willing to undergo. But I have, a BA and MA in literature. So in my book and I really focused a lot on some literary works. And when you bring up rage, I think of The Correspondent and Stephen Crane's The Open Boat, which is one of my favorite short stories that long ago I would teach in terms of his anger at the elements and at God and the seven mad gods. He exclaims, why are you doing this to me? And he feels like such a victim. And, many of my students have written about it. Certainly many scholars have written about it. But as I was in this new age of myself, if you will, and this becoming of who I am, I guess, I started understanding that after reading Aristotle and Sloterdijk, that you need rage and difficult situations to overcome it. So I started seeing Stephen Crane's real life experience as a journalist that turned into a short story within 48 hours of his shipwreck experience, which is fascinating. His ability to swim to shore despite the rough conditions and being shipwrecked, he deemed himself and determined himself as an athlete, whether he said it out loud or not, right? And then reflecting on that experience and how each of the men with him who survived the shipwreck and one that did not, the strongest one, ironically, he realized he needed to be angry to push himself to get to shore and survive the ocean. And then flipping that not only into a story of survival for the newspapers, but into a short story to share that experience. I think he was an athlete-philosopher-artist, right? As a result of that. And then if we go, because you always bring up the whale, and I love the whales as well, but from a literary standpoint, and Melville's, Moby Dick, and I write about Ahab's rage, but his rage was his own demise, right? He didn't use it in a productive way. He used it in a self-destructive way, and also wanting to kill something. So that part, rage was misused. But never do I think about the ocean as filled with rage. So it's interesting that you would describe it that way, but I also understand it, right? And I was so excited. Yesterday you gave me a tour. Oh, it was wonderful, not only around Salem, but then we went to Marblehead. And where was the Essex?
That was in the Salem Harbor, in the
gosh.
Customs House, which is all of the sailing ships that went all around the world and came back to Salem Harbor, and they had to log their cargo at the Customs House. And so there is a replica of the Essex.
All right, so
or something like that. I might be fact-checked here, but I do remember that because the Essex might have come out of Salem Harbor, which was the real-life inspiration for Melville's Moby Dick.
Exactly. So I got a copy of Owen Chase's narrative of the whale ship Essex, and he was the first, and actually, I wish I had the terminology of the shipmates and the crew, but it was a very young 14-year-old crew member that, along with Owen Chase, experienced a sentient moment with a sperm whale that made them understand in a fleeting moment that the whale might have emotions and feelings. And of course, going out on the Essex and all these other ships at this time during the 19th century was to kill them, right? For their oil, for the production of oil and maintaining the U.S.'s, energy supply and electricity. And Owen Chase wrote about this moment where he thought, this whale is angry at us because we just killed off his whole pod, right? And it's coming for us. But that sounded ridiculous. And if he were to actually speak that out loud, he would not have a job anymore, right? And it would affect the whole whaling industry. Well, Nathaniel Philbrick in The Heart of the Sea wrote about this much, much later. Ron Howard then developed a film with Chris Hemsworth, beautiful film, and I wrote about this also in my book. And that sentient moment to me is so critical. And the young 14-year-old that was on that Essex ship with Owen Chase wrote about it much later and wanted to make it more public because he thought it too was a pivotal moment, and humans understanding the sentience of what I call alien sentience, of creatures not like ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I love that you are examining these songs of the whales. I have not done so, but I think it's wonderful because they are such intelligent creatures, and a big part of my research when talking about alien sentience was through the octopus. And of course, Craig Foster's my octopus teacher. He also wrote Underwater Wild, and then came out with Amphibious Soul in 2024, and came to Coral Gables, Miami, and did a book launch and book signing, and I got to meet him, and I said to him, and it was so cute, I was shaking. It was like meeting your hero. Same with Rand Ortner when I got to meet him, and it was like, I wrote about you in my dissertation. And he was like, oh my gosh, and we're both blushing, and it was just such a great moment to meet people like I know you have in your research, that you admire, and you're along the same kind of thinking and ontology. It's been a great journey, really.
It is. And that alien sentience is something about the ocean, the mysterious dark ocean, and different marine life, and even corals that sit on a reef. There's all these encounters, these touches of different entities, different worlds that beings collide, too. Beings.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you come together, there is an encounter. One of my favorite quotes from an artist is, misunderstandings are predicated on meeting each other. I think there's a lot of kind of misunderstandings in alien connections, right?
For sure.
And communications. And we play with this a little bit with Ocean School Collective in terms of what would it be if we open lines of communication? What would we want to say? These are ethical questions.
For sure. And this morning over coffee we were talking, and of course our PhD is in the visual arts, right? And probably the three favorite mediums of visual arts for me is film and painting and photography. So I kept thinking about films as you were talking, and I'm thinking of Avatar and The Way of Water. That whole conversation, especially with the whales in that film, I really resonated with what you were speaking about and wanting to pursue in your own research. But also I was thinking about even the film Moana, and the dance and play and invitation and call to the ocean that she experiences in that story, which I've been sharing with my granddaughter Olivia, and seeing her as a strong athlete and sea voyager, and also interacting with all of that marine life as well is portrayed in many different mediums and can speak to many different audiences. And something else that we talked about is how if you don't know how to swim, both of us, right, we're lifeguards and competitive swimmers growing up, this can be daunting. This can be scary. The ocean can be a very scary place. And I think as I continue to write and continue to research and maybe work with you in the future with your ocean school, advocating just learning how to swim is going to help you appreciate the ocean on such an exponential level. Excuse me. Yeah, it's just going to, really raise yourself up.
Yes, and we had this wonderful experience during our artist residency off the Ocean Alliance, which is we had an expedition to 10 Pound Island, cool. 10 Pound Island, which is right off in Gloucester Harbor, and we had to bring all of our equipment, including our offerings to the whales, with with the painting, and we had a mandala and all of the filming equipment, and we had to get from our ship, which was our the Not for Nothing, to the 10-pound island, and we had to actually get it. We had a kayak, but we also had to swim. Some of us had to swim back and forth, and it was a great experience. It made the expedition, being in the ocean, feeling the water, diving into the water, being wet when you come out of the water, and that touch. So there is, and we even talk about where the land meets the sea and the air. We share the oxygen. It's bigger than just the ocean or the land.
It's a physiological response. That's the encounter. It's definitely ocean thinking, but for me, it's ontological. It's the being, the presence, the bodily response to the ocean that enhances the understanding of it and its creatures. Yeah.
So when, these a little bit bigger words like ontology or phenomenology, and you have some such wonderful words that I don't know in your,
I like words.
Words that are about oxygen. It's the
Right.
there's a word about not being able to breathe underwater. Some of these, being able to have different levels of gravity when you're underwater. It's like a ballet. And then
the
also
loss of gravity.
And the loss of gravity.
Wonderful.
And you have this beautiful section about the deep free divers that go down, and in Japan, the pearl divers.
The Japanese ama.
If you could maybe take us into the depths. What is it like to be in the depths?
Yeah.
Not just at the surface, but what is your research on being in the depths of the ocean?
Yeah, I am very fascinated with freediving. When I was a child, I grew up in Vero Beach and always had pools in the ocean nearby. I was very fortunate that way, very grateful that I had those experiences. But I was always trying to sit on the bottom of the pool for as long as I could. I liked the solitude, I liked the quiet, I liked the peace. I love the loss of gravity. Same when I was pregnant and I went into the pool and I was swimming and I just didn't feel that weight. I didn't feel, what we all feel as females pregnant, But when I really started looking into freediving and I started learning about the Japanese ama, I started understanding that they were not just experiencing the weightlessness of freediving, they were experiencing a sense of synesthesia where they felt that, or imagined, I guess, that they were hearing sunlight, that they were, looking at colors and hearing something at the same time, but also experiencing euphoria. So the dopamine rushes and just the chemical surges in the brain is what a lot of actual freedivers go for. In my 4th or 5th chapter, I do talk about the ethics of freediving because, these experiences can be euphoric and enjoyable, but we also have to understand our body's limitations, which is why I'm constantly in that ontological framework of knowing your body, right? And we are not marine life creatures as much as we might want to be. Luc Besson, great cult film, which I wrote about quite a bit, the Big Blue. There was an existential question is, do I prefer my life under the water or above the water? Well, you might have that preference, and Jacques Mayol was someone who actually, the film is based on. But your body can only stay under for so long. And as many freedivers try to push those limitations, they've also died along the way. Nicholas Maboli, for example, pushed himself a little too far. And there's a documentary that I write about, the deep, that also there was another death with an assistant aide for a free diver. In the process of trying to protect one, he lost his own life, not paying attention to his heart rate and fatigue and nervousness. And so all of these things you have to really be dialed into to decide, can you go this far? We're not dolphins and we're not whales and we're not the octopus that can stay under for so long. But interestingly though, even the octopus has to know its limitations. Sometimes it can walk on land and be on land, but then has to remember there's a period of time that this is only going to work. So, yeah, I guess, knowing the limitations, paying attention to those bodily responses. I think free divers, above all ocean athletes, are the most dialed into this. And when I write about slab surfing, for example, there's a documentary called Facing Monsters with Kirby Brown, where there was a lot of ethical questions. What I focused on was direct consequentialism, where you have people who are assisting you. In his case, his brother Keenan was on the wave runner, taking him out as far as he could to catch these slab waves. And then Kirby Brown has a near fatal injury. How that affects the people around you. His brother is starting feeling guilty that he was potentially someone who was bringing him to this dangerous place that he could lose his life. And then his family and his children, and how would they feel, right? When he was gone. He's willing to take the risk. He's willing for the sense of adventure, which I think all ocean athletes love and crave. But to what degree are you willing to take that risk if it takes your life, and how does that affect the people around you? It's important to think about.
It's important. It reminds me of a film that I saw with my son recently about a crew that goes down into the Baltic Sea to fix cables, the underwater sea cables. And it was this harrowing, it was a kind of a true-ish story, but it was so harrowing with, there was a big storm, and the cables that connect the ships to the crew that's going to go down, they have to put themselves into, different pressurized environment so that they can acclimate to the low pressure. And then they went down to try to fix it, but then there was a storm and everything broke, and then the person got lost.
I saw this.
Oh my gosh! And then I was just, I was like, I'm sitting next to him. I was so, the whole thing was just, and he was in the Navy, and he had this experience of being out in the ocean, and he was telling me what was actually, what would have happened. It was a harrowing movie to watch, believe me, because it was about being in that under those different conditions of pressure. And
I think that is an area I'd like to write about. You're using a really perfect adjective. It's harrowing, and your son, being in the Navy and being these experiences, I'm sure that was very frightening and daunting. I have a really good friend from high school. Her son does this kind of work, and he is I guess he's a scuba diver, but he works for a company that retrieves debris from the bottom of the ocean and fixes things, pipes, and it's very dangerous. It really is, but they're willing to do it because they love being underwater. So it's a trade-off and it's a sacrifice for sure. But for the rest of us watching it, it's scary.
Yes.
It really is.
And one of these divers was a young person who was just recently married or about to get married, and amazingly, because it's based on a true story, that he wanted to go back, and in agreement with his young wife, that was the job that he is doing.
Yeah.
And he went back into those conditions.
Yeah.
It was kind of extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think at the same time, courageous, honorable, and something we should also respect.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Well, these are, it's such a rich exploration that you have come upon as your life's work. It's
Thank you.
it's really
Yeah.
extraordinary. Your background in literature and your experience as an athlete, a swimmer, and then an ocean athlete, and then going into the deep philosophical inquiry that is about the world of our human experience, trying to understand human experience in the world. And I think one of the things that we're pushing always, these boundaries of pushing the boundaries of philosophy itself, what can the ocean add? What can being in the ocean, what can that experience add to the body of work of, human philosophers in your experience? Because you're in that territory.
Yeah, for me, Heidegger's concept of design helped me to put my life and oceanic experiences into perspective. That one word, design, to the idea of becoming, and mit design, being in the world with others, right? And Nietzsche's concept of the body philosophy and overcoming, and even the will to power, right? And then Sloterdijk's concept of rage, and Aristotle's concept of thymos, and Maurice Merleau-Ponty's just whole, delving into, flesh as a milieu, and then, the idea of touch and the idea of sentience. All of this just started making sense. And I just pay homage to all of them for helping me to make sense of my own life. Never mind make sense of the art and the literature and the artists and the philosophers that I've had the great fortune to meet and to talk to.
Yes. Well, for me, the ocean is I've kind of talked about it as pulling your sock inside out. It's a different way of looking at things, the way we've framed land territory, territorializing the land with all of our long history of conquest and, different ways of being in building society, building civilizations, falling civilizations. And that is one of our main concerns. But there's always been stories of the ocean. Always stories of the ocean. Poseidon, even the Greeks with the Mediterranean. And, what can that offer us maybe in today's terms? Because it is a rather alien world that's so close to us.
Well, I think a lot of people are allowing us a perspective of that. I mentioned James Cameron, and certainly he's done so much underwater exploration. And I want to hear more about your meeting with Sylvia Earle, who is just, wow, a pioneer, right? Especially for women in the ocean, and that she's dedicated her whole life. I love what she's doing with Mission Blue and creating all these hope spots. And I saw a documentary, actually, where James Cameron and her are, they've collaborated and talked and are great friends, have a great same vision of things. So I want to keep with my concept of the athlete-philosopher-artist, because there are so many out there who are helping us understand the ocean on multiple levels. And I don't think it's as foreign and as alien as it used to be. And something that, Sloterdijk talked about is, definitely we've operated for millennia in the territorialization of land, but we have had this great experience of voyaging out into this boundless sea, and many artists are so inspired by that. And what I've been discovering is so many writers and filmmakers and athletes have had the actual immersive experience in the ocean, and that will continue to be, I think, my line of research is the ontology of it all.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Yeah.
Well, we are, we are We've had such a wonderful conversation. We can keep going. I don't know if there are any other like topics that you were thinking about talking about that we have maybe.
No, you've asked wonderful questions. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate this time to share a passion of mine, and I love that it is equally your passion.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to be in good company.
Yes.
Ocean company.
Ocean company. Well, we're there's so much depth to this topic. I mean, and the blue ocean and the different varieties of the different qualities. One of the things we do talk about is in the work that I've done, which is Places Medium, is that there are place is something that can be sheltered that does have specific boundaries that demarcate a place that's different than another place. I think some of your experiences of different ocean experiences in different parts of the world can speak to that, because you would think it's just jump in the ocean and start swimming. But what makes something is actually very specific to location.
It is, and I am starting to think of Heather Reed and her text, Introduction to the Philosophy of Sport. She writes about athleticism and sports as a philosophy, obviously, but she talks about the importance of a sporting event creates the boundaries and limitations that allow us to push ourselves through and over and into, if you will. I like prepositions, but and ocean swimming, for me, is within a race, within a competition, is within the community of swimmers and the camaraderie of the swimmers. The most recent race I did actually was in 2022, which is now telling me I need to set up another race. It's been 4 years now. But I was in Almirada, and we were all at the starting line, at the dock before we set out to swim, and everybody's like, well, what time do you want to make? And what path do you think you're going to take? And, where's your boat? And, we understand that there's limitations and confines, but that's what brings us into this, the formality of it. To just go out and swim freely is wonderful in the sense of play and creativity, but to do the distance, there needs to be a frame, there needs to be a context, and that's what pushes you, and that's what makes it even more exciting. But at the same time, I'm thinking of even Thor Heyerdahl, right, in Kon-Tiki, and he takes this passage from Peru into the Polynesian islands, and he wants to simulate the same path, but it was with a lot of research, and he wrote his own PhD dissertation on this, and that voyage needed sponsorship, and it needed the help of his crew, and they built the actual balsa wood raft to simulate that same experience. They didn't just go out into the ocean and experience the ocean, right? It was a planned journey. It was something that had a starting and an end point. And that's where you get that sense of accomplishment. That's where, even though it's planned, you can still have those unexpected moments of those marine life creatures, or the change in weather and the change of the ocean patterns, right? So it still needs a frame. And I think, when I reflect back on my experience at IDSVA, that was a 5-year journey. When I first started, I thought, oh my gosh, that seems so long. And then when I came out the other side, I was so grateful that it was that time period, and also saddened that it wasn't even longer. And sometimes we feel this, and you've probably seen this with a lot of other athletes in any sport, honestly. You get to the finish line and it's bittersweet, because that journey required preparation and the unexpected, and so many moments of joy and sadness and sorrow and anger, but then you recover, and then you come through the other side, and it's like, it's very bittersweet. You're happy to have finished, but then that experience was so rich, I like the word you used before, that you're sad that it's over.
Well, it's a good way to bring us back into Expedition Oceanborn, because that was a lot of the experience of how long as a collective we were working to set up this 1 month residency. It was really years of work and preparation. We had come together years before. We had done a public performance at Ocean Alliance in 2023, I think, or 2022. We had been working together. We had the preparation of what we were going to do, and that 1 month was what we had, you know, and it's just like taking an expedition, and, you know,
sure.
things, maybe, you know, the technology doesn't go right, or the sailboat, you know, has to go in for repairs, or it's different than you expected. But the journey is, that story is the journey. And part of our research into the archive of the Ocean Alliance was about their expeditions around the world. They had a boat called the Odyssey, and they did a worldwide tour for years, but it did have a beginning and an end, and there was a logbook at the end that we found in our research with people. Just, it was a life experience that you'll never forget. The mishaps, the joy, the memories that remain.
And also, if you don't mind me interjecting, this is so great. The epiphanies, the philosophical awareness. I'm even thinking about the Artemis II that just went up, and
Right.
you know, forgive me for not remembering all the astronauts' name, but one of the astronauts really had an epiphany about humanity and the collective oneness of all of us, and it was beautiful. And you could see that in the moment, he's like, this has been a great journey, and I know you're looking at us having this experience, but we're looking back on you. And he's, I didn't have anything prepared, but you also get these epiphanies,
Yes.
you know, in your journey, whatever that journey is, and it's definitely worth it.
It's definitely worth it. Well, this has been worth it to have you, Terri, as
Thank you,
a
Kate.
very special guest into Ocean School Podcast. And we're so happy, and we hope you come back, and that this Ocean School continues to evolve, and we can continue to collaborate with each other going forward.
I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.